Modern transportation is driven almost entirely by conventional fuel. As a result, oil is considered the most strategic commodity used today by mankind. Remove the fuel supply, and sophisticated economies will grind to a halt. And here lies the problem. Besides the fact that fossil fuel emissions are a major factor in the advancement of global warming, almost 80% of the world's crude oil reserves are situated in countries of the Middle East, all of which are undemocratic and are openly hostile to the West. They use the revenue they generate from sales to acquire weapons and sponsor terrorism. Moreover, every time one of the oil-producing countries wants to pressure the developed world, it cuts back production and causes gasoline prices to skyrocket. Not a healthy situation for a nation that needs both security and fuel at reasonable prices.
The world economy is strangled by oil prices. And without getting oil back in order, that is, getting oil down or eliminating oil, it will keep strangling the world economy.
This is a recent motor show in Beijing, China. China, followed by India, is the fastest growing importer of petroleum and in the not too distant future could be the world's largest consumer. US security officials have long said that China's escalating thirst for fuel will drive it ever closer to terrorist-sponsoring governments like Iran, to such an extent that it will compromise US-China relations. And, by the way, this is what commuters in Beijing have to endure on their roads. The pollution is so dense that visibility is restricted in some areas to less than 100 meters. In 2009, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu announced that Israel is taking the lead to help the world lose its dependence on fossil fuels. Netanyahu believes that alternative sources of energy must be developed and challenged Israel's universities and high-tech sector to come up with a solution. The government allocated funds and established a committee to oversee the project under the chairmanship of the head of the National Economic Council, Professor Eugene Kandel.
We set a course for a 10-year program where we put between $40 and $50 million a year into research, development, support of fledgling companies, and most importantly of all is international cooperation, both on policy issues, technology issues, and explaining the importance of this. There's a big movement in the United States now that realizes that this is an issue of national security.
Several universities, private companies and startups have been involved in alternative energy research for years. The Israeli electric car enterprise Better Place is one of the participants. Others have only just joined the race. This was the recent launching of the Ben Gurion University of the Negev Energy Initiative, which is a multidisciplinary interface for bringing together the many different emerging fields of alternative fuel investigation. BGU Vice President and Dean for Research and Development, Professor Moti Hershkovitz, says Ben Gurion University has been in the forefront of energy research for over 30 years.
The role of an academic institution like BGU is critical in trying to develop, first of all, to find new technologies and to develop them in the very early stage to be able to then transfer them to industry.
The idea is to create another startup nation, not just on ICT, but now on technologies to replace oil. And there's so many of them already on the way that we believe we can have an impact very quickly.
One of the people sitting in the audience at the launch of the BGU Energy Initiative was Yehuda Bronitsky of Ormet Industries.
Civilization, which made a lot of progress, is based on very inefficient use of energy. It started by using slaves, and then we became slaves of fuel. And now we have to get rid of this habit.
In the 1950s, as a young engineer, Bronitsky developed a turbine to produce electricity from a range of green energy sources. Today, his company owns and operates over 750 geothermal and renewable energy power plants throughout the world. Bronitsky believes that mankind has no choice and it's just a matter of time before an alternative to fossil fuel is found.
As the necessity is a matter of inventions, and just to take a very simple example, in Israel we had no water, so even before desalination, drip irrigation was invented. It was not invented because somebody thought it's a good idea to have. It was invented because there was this necessity, and there were people who knew how to use science and technology to do it.
And then there are those who believe that there's no way that any breakthrough in alternative energy production will be able to meet the growing world demand for automotive fuels. They say that new alternative sources of fossil fuels must be found and developed.
There is insufficient possibility of generating enough energy by renewables within the next 30 to 40 years to keep up with the growing world demand for fuels. It's just the way it is. The world uses 40,000 gallons of crude oil per second. 1 second, 40,000 gallons are gone.
Dr. Harold Vinegar, former chief scientist for Royal Dutch Shell and now of Israel Energy Initiatives, says that the time is ripe for Israel to exploit its enormous shale deposits that are located in the Elah Valley, some 50 kilometers southwest of Jerusalem.
We believe that we can produce this oil, actually this finished product, between $35 and $40 per barrel, and today Brent crude is $115 per barrel. And with time, our costs will go down because it's technologically and R&D based, whereas conventional oils are based just on the available supply, which is short. Demand is going up because you have countries like China and India with a growing population wants to have cars, and the amount of available conventional oil is going down.
Yossi Hollander believes that for the short term, using natural gas for transport is the way to go.
Everybody always joked that Israel is the only place in the Middle East with no oil and gas. That joke is finally over. Israel has found significant amounts of natural gas in the Mediterranean. And the opportunity for Israel is to actually convert its fleet away from oil, its car fleet, its truck fleet, to natural gas or to byproducts of natural gas, for example, methanol. If Israel is going to do it, it can do it within a few years, maybe 10 years or less. That will be a remarkable achievement that will first save the country tons of money of importing oil, but I think will signal to the rest of the world how quickly it can be done and how more economical it is.
And Israel's gas discovery came not a moment too soon. Egypt was Israel's main gas supplier until terrorists attacked the gas feed line in Sinai, cutting off all flow to Israel. The Egyptian government then unilaterally cancelled the supply contract, clearly demonstrating how dangerous it is for any nation to rely on energy supplies from unstable sources.